bunch of screens up. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, today is our org in an updated work plan proposal for our policy sessions on organizational and information meetings for 2021. She has worked hard with a leadership team and council members and staff to put together a plan, as I've mentioned before, that is a good representation of where we're at today and recognizes that things can change as they always do. Think where we were 1 year ago today. But just to help us stay on path and to help us identify what our staff should be prioritizing in its work and what the mayor's office should understand is our shared council priorities. We will also talk about honorary resolutions, really just to shore up a policy tied directly to the work of the city and a process for which to evaluate them before they move forward. And then the org committee catch all the update on committees, boards, and activities. So we'll look for council members to share back reports on the commissions, boards, and organizations that they represent the council on, so that we're in the loop on what is going on in those projects. We may save, I know some of us are involved in projects that are maybe will be covered in our HRA update too. So we'll manage that when we get to it. So that is what is in front of us today. So I will, if there's nothing else, and I'm looking to my colleagues, think that if there's anything else, it fits into the updates on activities section of this meeting. So let's see. So I will turn things over to our Chief Budget Officer, Holly Houston.
Good morning, council members. I am just going to pull up the document that I sent out that is a high-level overview of the City Council's 2021 work plan. The overarching council priorities include sustainable street infrastructure plan, reducing gun violence, affordable housing and stable neighborhoods, and a responsible fiscal policy. This outline is categorized by types of meetings. And so the first section, first Wednesday of each month, is what we are having today. So the monthly City Council Organizational Committee meeting. This has an ongoing agenda, and then we also may have additional items that fall onto this agenda from month to month. The policy sessions that we have identified this year. And so the difference between a policy session and an org meeting is the outcome of a policy session may change an ordinance, a legislative procedure, or a budget. So there's something that is identified that needs a change. And that includes the EB management plan and financing. Just an update, I'm planning to schedule some briefings the first week of March with council members, and the Parks Department would be presenting tentatively in April on that plan. We are planning a gun violence prevention panel discussion on March 17th. This falls under police crime prevention strategy. And so that I have emailed about, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end of this presentation on that if you have specifics. We will be hearing from the Public Works Department on the street maintenance policy and budget at the end of April. And we're working on HRA outlook and a stability plan. So there's not ongoing revenue that supports the HRA. And so this is to take a look at how we can stabilize that budget so that each year we have a plan on how to fund the activities that are important to the city. Problem property, neighborhood disputes. The staff contact is Ward 2 for that policy session. Commercial and residential displacement, the contact is Ward 4. And then parking and abandoned vehicles, the contact is Ward 5. And I will be checking periodically in with those ward offices to make sure that we get something on the calendar. I don't have dates at this time. I'll just take a pause there if there's any questions. Okay, moving on to organizational committee meetings. So this,
Holly, before you move on, it looks like Ms. Prince has a question.
Yeah, Holly, I think I would be interested in assisting or helping you with the gun violence session, if my office could sign on to that.
Okay, I will, at the end of this, I'll give a brief update on what's been done so far, and then I will touch base with you offline as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
The organizational committee sessions or informational updates. So these are meetings where there's a focus area and a topic that the council wants to learn more, and there might not be a policy issue identified yet, but something could come out of these meetings. And then an informational update is just to raise awareness on the topic. So we have planning updates on, and I should have, that's not planning. It's just updates on major development. I have a couple documents, and so I didn't update it here. I apologize. So we're hearing from Melanie and the Port Authority and Ramsey County and our different partners on the major developments in April. COVID vaccine update from public health. So that is scheduled for the first Wednesdays of each month at the 3:30 meeting. We're getting a fleet management update in March. That was brought up at budget time. We didn't have a chance to hear from them, but want to hear about the good work that they're doing. And then administrative citations. The community engagement process will kick off in the beginning of March, and council members will be contacted by DSI and the city attorney's office to update them on what community engagement is being planned and what will be presented at that meeting. And then in April, they'll take all that feedback they heard from the community input and present council with their proposal. And at that time, then council can weigh in and provide additional feedback before it is on the agenda to vote and go to the Charter Commission. Then we have a plan to get an update from Continuum of Care and Heading Home Ramsey County. That will be later in the year that they're just getting up and running. Affordable housing, alternative housing discussion. This is, we've also talked about the tiny home. We've called it tiny homes as well. So Ward 4 was going to provide an update on the work they're doing. This could teeter-totter between an org meeting or a policy session, I think, but the plan was to get an update from Ward 4 and then decide on where it belongs.
And Ms. Houston, just to quickly interrupt, on that topic, I believe every ward has mentioned an interest in this. I think what we were trying to do on this particular topic was just to not have so many cooks in the kitchen. The advocates for different things were all reaching into us differently. And so we're looking to, it seemed that Matt Pravratsky had stepped into that role of kind of wrangling information. And so just so that we're all on the same page, because I think that there's no question that there's support here, more just like where can our support be best directed and how do we, again, just for efficiency's sake, how do we make the best use of our time in this? Because it did feel, I think, at least from my perspective, and I think what Holly was hearing is like everybody was getting contacted by everybody, and it was a little on the messy side. So we are trying to wrangle that and be able to focus what our the best use of our time and efforts are to move and advance initiatives, particularly around tiny homes, but other alternative housing as well. Thanks.
Yep, thank you. We will be getting a mid-year update from the Office of Financial Services in mid-June. And so at that time, as you recall, we had some funding in contingency, and we will review the revenue projections at that time to see if that funding can be released to the parks and library. 1% public art set aside. This isn't currently scheduled, but I'm working to schedule that at 3:30, and we should have a report on investments and projects in April, I believe. So that is moving forward. Ramsey County and St. Paul Workforce Solutions. So we'll be hearing from Ling Becker and the work she's doing there. This is just to the Citizens League. The Community First Public Safety Commission report is due in May. This is a placeholder just to remind us that that work is being completed. And I know Councilmember Jalali will be updating council at these meetings as she sees fit.
And Ms. Houston, I'm going to bump in again and just say that it's brought to my attention that Ms. Jalali is not at our meeting this morning because she is at the Citizens League Community First Public Safety Commission meeting. So she should be prepared to present to us at our next group meeting. We won't have to wait for an org committee. We'll just put it on our agenda. But we should perhaps look at how our meetings dovetail with it's on this Wednesday. It is going to continue to be a conflict with us, and I think we would all agree that we want her there. So maybe we need to think about that with our scheduling a little bit as this commission. I think they're at midpoint right now, and so actually next week or the week after would be a really good time to get an update from her. But she is there at this time, so she will not be reporting to us today unless for some reason they finish in an hour. But I understand they're marathoners, so I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay, thank you for that update, Council President Brenmon. Then we will be working on providing city program and policy updates. So for all the new programs that the City Council has initiated in the last 2 years, I'm working with DSI and HERO. I have a meeting scheduled to just talk to them about this and plan out how to best present this information to the council if it's 1 or 2 meetings and to get all the right departments at the meeting that should be there.
And again, this is just an effort to, we are always working hard and kind of moving forward at the next problem and tackling the next challenge in front of us. And we want to make sure that we're also being mindful about things that we have passed and their implementation, the cost of their implementation, the success of their implementation, if there's anything that we've implemented that needs to be modified. So being just intentional about our check-ins on programs or initiatives that we have been a part of or have been initiated by the administration for that accountability piece.
Yes, it's always good to have a check-in and to just refresh on if there's what's working well, or are there any unintended consequences that could be remedied, and how to make the ordinances work as they were intended. HRA meetings. So Caitlin and I are working with Director Goodman and Deputy Director Guild to schedule those. That's the list that we're working on. The one that's currently scheduled is the conduit bond study. That will be presented March 10th. And then the HRA updates on the new programs and policies. Director Goodman has been working to incorporate those into her executive reports that she just started, I believe, last HRA meeting. So she will be making sure those programs are discussed in that time frame. Then other meetings and work that the council is doing includes audit committee, the reparations committee, and then the budget committee meetings. And then finally, other. So not everything may require an update, or we can first start with a briefing or memo and then decide if a meeting is required. And so this is a list of things that are on the work plan to follow up and make sure that the council is informed on. I will pause there.
And I guess I would just say that this one thing that's not captured maybe in this document as you're going through it is we had a conversation. Well, now I'm getting my weeks mixed up, but last week or the week prior with the Assistant Chief Rob Thomaser about just the police response to some recent spikes in random violence, and one of the follow-ups on that meeting was having a conversation with our county attorney's office as well as the sheriff's office and perhaps even the bench to understand what are the challenges that we're facing and using our role as a council to convene those voices. And I think that there is some overlap with the reducing gun violence conversation, but really we're kind of talking about the, for lack of a better term, the bureaucratic side of criminal justice, and what are the challenges that we're facing that are ongoing? What are the challenges that we're facing that are new, that have to do with COVID, that have to do with Freedom Fund, and just to get a better understanding of that. So the intention, those are conversations that we're organizing to be part of our 3:30 meeting as a check-in for, to allow the public to hear answers to these questions. And of course, as you can imagine, given who we're trying to schedule, it is a little bit more challenging to get those things on the schedule. But I think we should make sure that there's some recognition of that part of the public safety piece that we're trying to coordinate and understand. So, Ms. Naker.
Thank you, Council President. And Holly, thanks so much. This is so clear, and it's obviously a ton of work has gone into thinking this through. I have just a question or maybe a suggestion about the other category. I know I totally agree, not everything has to be a meeting. And I know there aren't dates yet for these memos, reports, and briefings to come out to us. One thought I had was just to be efficient and not have us receive an update via email and then all 7 of us be emailing you for clarification or emailing departments with questions. Perhaps depending on when you send those out, they could be staggered and we could plan time at these org committee meetings just to talk about them. And then if we had any questions on what we read, that would be a time to discuss them together. And we certainly don't have to discuss them if we don't have questions, but there's a placeholder. Sort of like we're doing today with our kind of substantive item of the resolutions policy. So just a thought.
Council President Brennan, Councilmember Naker, that's a great idea. I will make sure that that is incorporated into the ongoing monthly meetings. I will just show you how it's shaping up so far. I have too many windows open too. Let's see. On the calendar, if you look at a list view, so we're really scheduled out through May. And so then we have the opportunity to schedule those additional meetings, the rest throughout the late spring, midsummer there. So, and then, sorry if I went too fast, but do you want me to go back there?
I think that's fine. Okay. And obviously if we're looking, some people prefer to look at a calendar format. Some people, there's all different ways to look at these things, but I think that's the easiest way, the list is the easiest way to get it on a screen. Otherwise we'd be flipping through the next 12 months of pages. Right. But just seconding the thank you to you, Ms. Houston, for I always had this visual of like somebody used one time of trying to put an octopus in a grocery bag. Just there's so much stuff that the work is important. All of the work is important. And to try to synthesize, like, where are we coalescing? Which things add up to the most impact? What are things that each office can work on individually? What are the things that if we work on collectively, we will have more success? Is a huge task and undertaking. And I want to thank you for your work in that, Ms. Maloney as well. And then also each of the council offices who have helped shape this work plan, where it is today with their thoughtful input and their passion around issues. I think that we've really come to a document that I'm proud of and that I recognize will, again, probably change. So I just appreciate the collaboration here. I know it is a change. We've been kind of in the process of this change for a few years now, where I think people used to be more inclined to keep their priorities and their initiatives kind of close to the vest so that other people didn't use them against them or jump in and do it for them or what have you. And I think that the spirit of collaboration here has really helped empower this body and help us be successful in the work that we do with the budget. So I really appreciate that work from leadership from you, Holly, and then also from the collaboration of council offices. So thank you all for that. Other thoughts on our work plan at this time?
Do you want me to quickly just go over the gun violence prevention plan for?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just trying to get a good, I sent out this document yesterday and I'll read through it. And so currently the plan is we're having a panel discussion on March 17th from 10 to, I have till 12 p.m. just because it's, I think, a worthy topic that might take the whole 2 hours with 5 panelists. We have invited Healing Streets, the St. Paul Police Department community ambassadors, the Moms Demand Action, and the St. Paul Police Department, and then the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. And the plan is that each panelist would introduce themselves and explain their focus of work, the results that they've been seeing, and their challenges. And then the council would ask a series of questions that each would answer. The questions would include, why are we seeing an increase in people shot, homicides, and shots fired? How can we reduce gun violence? What are we doing that is currently working, and what should we initiate or change? Are there points of prevention and intervention at the individual, community, or policy level? And so that should be a very robust conversation. And I am preparing to collect outcome data that from Healing Streets and the community ambassadors. They presented last November and that was requested. So I've asked for that information just to be updated and shared prior to this discussion, as well as we'll collect some data on gunshots and homicides and shots fired. I know we've all seen that information, but I'll just be collecting it in one place so that you have a reference and a resource to help through that discussion.
Ms. Houston, one thing that we've been hearing as a national trend is domestic and family violence, not standard what we would traditionally think of as when we say the term domestic violence, but gun violence between family members, relations, and maybe if there can be a bit of a focus on that, because I think in this first few months of this year, we've really seen that. And even looking at last year's trends, we know that most of our homicides were people known to each other. And so just really understanding sort of how things have shifted, because I think that helps us understand what program might be the most effective here in St. Paul. We certainly don't want to, be looking at old information about, gang violence if things have switched to these smaller groups or more, if it's switched. So just kind of getting an understanding of that. But I do understand that there has been a nationwide switch to this more domestic family, known and related violence, which is it's a very sad and disturbing trend. So on that, if you could include that a little bit in this planning as well. Are there other thoughts on this? I guess I would just add to that I don't remember if it was Ms. Prince or Ms. Naker that initiated the conversation that we had a few years back just about poverty. And the panel format was very successful in terms of us not lecturing and us not getting lectured at, but instead having more a sharing of information. And I think that it created, at least for speaking for myself, like a lens for which to look at our policy making going forward. So hoping that this format, which we are using in a kind of a hybrid, because we were also calling in different elected officials and different leaders to talk to us directly about particular pieces of this. But I think as a panel, we've talked about our role as a convener, bringing these folks together and having that conversation in a group setting, could be effective. So that's kind of the thought behind that. And again, it's not the only thing, but one piece of a conversation that will hopefully help us provide some direction on where we think gun violence reduction can head in the city. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I'm really excited about this session. I agree. I liked the panel discussion a lot for the poverty session, and I think this is shaping up to be equally productive. And I just want to share my hope for this is that even though it is a panel, that it is not as much a everybody sharing what they're already doing sort of conversation, like everybody saying the first page of their website, but actually a discussion about what more we all could or should be doing. And I think right now the agenda is structured that way, really getting quickly to what more could we do, what should we stop, what should we continue, what should we change. And I'm excited that we're already being intentional about that. So just wanted to share what I'm hoping we get out of it.
Great. Any other thoughts? And noted Ms. Prince earlier in the meeting mentioning that you'd like to be more involved in the planning of that session, and I think any help is appreciated. All right, well, great. Thank you, Holly. Is there anything else you need to cover here today?
Council President Brenmone, I am complete.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Okay. This is like a glitter cannon moment where it just feels like tons of work and then, oh, there it is. Thank you very, very much for your work on this, and we'll continue to tweak and adjust that as we go. We're checking in on this work plan just for what it's worth every week with our leadership team. So, all right, let us switch gears. I believe the next item on our agenda is honorary resolution process, and I believe Trudy is leading that discussion. Sorry, Ms. Maloney.
Sure. All right. As you recall, in October, you all approved a process. You all passed Resolution 2788, which requested that we establish a process to address community requests that you received for resolutions addressing religious persecution. So we talked about creating a process, and you all approved a process that basically involved two steps. One, the first step would be that we'd evaluate the resolutions on whether they violated the First Amendment, and basically did this request favor one religion over another. And if the answer was yes, then we would say, no, the council really should not approve this resolution. But if the answer was no, then we would look at evaluating it through about 5 other criteria, which was, does it have a council member sponsorship? Is the request coming from a St. Paul resident or a nonprofit located in St. Paul, or a nonprofit that has a significant number of members from St. Paul? Does the request align with the city's legislative agenda or policies or goals? Does it contemplate ongoing involvement from the city? Does the outcome champion justice and equity by confronting issues of discrimination and promote innovative avenues for accessibility and economic opportunities for all residents and businesses? And are there any negative or unproductive ramifications? So that would be the process that we would use to evaluate these resolutions. So the question, we're bringing it back today, and the question before you today for you to discuss is whether you want to open up this process and policy to go beyond just religious resolutions, those community requests that aren't necessarily religious-based, but may pertain to other issues. And so we could look at modifying the language a little bit, which we can do that with this policy. And so I turn it back to you all to decide whether you want to open it up a little more.
Thank you, Ms. Maloney. Could you scroll up your screen a little bit? Whenever there's a share screen, I'm always sitting there trying to adjust it a little bit, but I can only see the very top part, and I'm wondering if you could just push down a little bit. Okay. Okay. Again, I'm looking at you, Ms. Naker. I think we agreed as a council on the general premise here, but I think at that time there was a request from your office to just take a look at it and make some modifications that expanded it to more broadly. And I apologize, but I don't know where we are in that. that work. If perhaps you can drive.
Sure. Happy to. Thanks, Council President. So my recollection is that the original conversation about this was about a year ago, as Trudy mentioned, maybe a little bit less than that. And I think I missed the meeting at which this policy was adopted specifically for religious resolutions, but I know there had been conversation about generally having some sort of way of deciding whether or not to introduce resolutions that were asked to present by community members or national organizations. There seems like there's an increasing trend of sort of asking cities to pass resolutions or sign on to things that may have implications far beyond the city, or calling on different elected bodies that aren't the city to do something but aren't actually related to anything that the city council would take action on. I know I've introduced some of those resolutions myself, and often they have been the source of a lot of controversy and often a lot of work for all of our offices in responding to the messages that we get, both pro and con, on many of those issues. And certainly, I'm always interested in figuring out ways for us to do our work smarter, not harder. I think the conversation had been, is there a way before we put these issues out there and get a lot of attention and a lot of controversy about things that, again, our resolution may not have any effect on, but is more of a symbolic statement. Do we want to have some sort of process of deciding whether or not to do that? So that was what we decided to do with the religious resolutions. And I think that there was always an interest in at least considering doing that for other resolutions that meet those criteria that I just described. So I missed the meeting where we did the religious resolution, and I had recently asked if this was still on the table, and I volunteered to just add a little bit of language to this policy so that it could apply to any symbolic resolution. And the only thing that is added here is right under number 3, step 1, there's just if it is religion related are the words that are added in. Otherwise, I think the rest of the policy can apply just fine to other resolutions as well. The one thing that we don't have here that I'm really curious as to people's thoughts on is how we would define what kinds of resolutions would follow this policy. I don't think right now we have one shared definition of what a symbolic resolution is that would apply. So I think religious resolutions are pretty clear. Although and symbolic resolutions are not. So I could certainly attempt to wordsmith that definition, but I'm not going to try to do it on the fly. But I'm curious as to people's thoughts on that. But that's where we stand, I think, Council President.
Okay. Thank you. And I think I would just add, before we shift to conversation, is that this in no way precludes any council member from, defining their own position or taking a stand on an issue. I know I've talked to some of my colleagues about, you can always write a letter, you can always make a statement, you can always write an opinion. I mean, obviously this has no effect on what we do as individuals. I think this is just for resolution, before a resolution would come to the full council for consideration, and it is in response to some challenging resolutions that we've faced in the past that ended up being really consuming of time and sometimes just consuming. And so I think when that we're all, sometimes I say we're just like, we're kind of a chain gang, we're in this together. So when we go public with these things, we all face those impacts. And so just to be able to have this to kind of put through the plinko before something comes before the council, I think is a respectful approach to working with a group of 7 individuals with different perspectives. So Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. Yeah, Trudy, thank you so much for this proposed process. I think it is really, really helpful, especially when it is for a resolution that's related to religion or political persecution, just because I feel like it's helpful to have the council do research for the council members so that we have some sort of context, education ahead of time about what is being put in front of us. And then Councilmember Naker, to the last thing you mentioned, having to figure out what type of, if we were to broaden this process out to symbolic resolutions, I'd have a lot of questions around like what that means, because I know in my first year on the council, I've seen a lot of different resolutions come in front of us, like symbolic for celebrating a certain cultural holiday, or like somebody passed away, so we want to do a resolution to honor them, and there's like all sorts of things. And so I think that's something I definitely would have to think about more, and maybe wouldn't feel ready yet to make a decision about that today.
Ms. Prince.
Councilmember Prince, you're on mute.
Yeah.
I share Ms. Yang's concern about how the term symbolic would be interpreted. So that's one concern I have is I appreciate the questions below. I think all of them.
Prince, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble seeing this document. Does it say symbolic?
No, but that's the word on our agenda.
Okay.
And I believe that's a word that Ms. Naker just used.
Okay.
Okay. And
that is the concern I have, is we're broadening it beyond religion. And what are we then talking about? So I think that's a potential slippery slope. I think for those of us in St. Paul who represent areas that are broadly multicultural, when we, I know the resolution that we're speaking of was one that I brought in last May, and it created international furor. So I understand that was the driving influence behind this, and I really appreciate that this is designed to have us not get back to that again. But I will say, I have a pending resolution right now that I have emailed to each of my colleagues and asked them to get back to me about. And if there were a decision by my colleagues, if one or two of my colleagues say, I really can't support bringing this in, it truly is an honorary commemorative resolution, I won't bring it in because I do not want to have a split vote on something that's intended to be a positive statement of support for this organization. So what I'm concerned about here is a 30-day process that ties our hands when we have the ability to have conversations among us and bring this in. I think I guess to Ms. Yang's point, the issue is going to be how the policy is interpreted beyond religious related resolutions. So a person referred last week to me about, some of us are looking at bringing in a resolution on from St. Paul 350 relating to the Enbridge Line 3 pipeline. And it was referred to as a symbolic resolution. And the issue I have there is that is something that impacts our St. Paul water supply. It impacts our cities and states' carbon goals. It is an environmental issue that we can agree or disagree on. But to that point, I think that if that were required to go through this process, I think it would be a violation of council members' ability to bring something in that's of genuine policy and practical concern for people living in our city. So as long as we are not requiring each other to use a 30-day process on things that we just simply don't like, then I don't have a problem with it. But as I'm saying, with this resolution that I've sent out to all of you right now, I can assure you that if one of you has a problem and couldn't vote for it, it wouldn't make sense in the spirit of putting that resolution forward for there to be a split vote. So that's my contribution to this discussion. I think symbolic is in the eye of the beholder.
All right. I appreciate that too. And I agree. I think that the religious question, it fits really easily and appropriately with this conversation. I mean, if we're violating First Amendment or favoring one religion over the other, like I'm out and I don't want to have anything to do with it. And so I think that that's really easy. And I think that the challenge is exactly what you bring up. And I hear you. And I think this needs a little bit more work. I don't think the intention is ever for this to be a resolution or it's just more of a policy and a practice. So I think working on it to make sure that it makes sense is a good thing, and it gets at what the challenge is. I mean, I appreciate you made two examples. One is the resolution that you've shared with council members, and you are looking to, kind of test the water and see if there's support there, looking for a 7-0 vote. The other example that you shared didn't sound like that was the case. So it's, it kind of, you're right, it kind of symbolic depends on, or honorary depends on, the perspective of the person bringing it in. So this makes it kind of a funky policy. So I agree with what you're saying. I think the intention is just to, keep things right-sized. I see Ms. Naker and Mr. Tao both have hands up, so I'll start with Ms. Naker. She's in the queue, and then go to Mr. Tao.
Thanks, Council President. And Council Members Prince and Yang, I really appreciate your comments. I completely agree. I think we need to flesh out what this definition would be. And one thing that comes to mind, and again, this is not a formal proposal, but I think what I've been thinking of, and what I think others may have been thinking of, is something to do with taking political positions on issues that are beyond the jurisdiction of the city of St. Paul might be one of the categories that I'm thinking of. Not because I totally agree that there are symbolic resolutions that honor communities in St. Paul, that honor people, that honor businesses, and those are, that's the council's role in sort of a ceremonial sense to make those proclamations or resolutions, and those absolutely don't fall into the category. But I think it's when we are taking positions on issues that are beyond our jurisdiction that I'm interested in making sure we're weighing the pros and cons of that. And I think for me anyway, that comes down to the fact that we all have our hands full as council members, just fully understanding the issues that we do have jurisdiction over. And I know whenever I see a resolution come forward, as soon as it is put forward onto the table, and I appreciate your point, Ms. Prince, about being unwilling to introduce it if you don't have unanimity, but we haven't agreed to that, and right now people aren't bound to that. And as soon as a resolution comes forward, I do feel the need to really educate myself about what the issues are behind it. And sometimes those issues are incredibly complex. And to do all the work to figure out what my position is on a particular issue when, it's to the government of a foreign country or the federal government of our own country, or the work is already finished, or, just really takes time away from the tasks that I'm primarily responsible for. So that's another reason why I would love to have this additional review before it comes in front of us for consideration.
Mr. Tell.
Thank you, Council President, and I apologize for joining late. I was in a important meeting. I'm just can clarify to Councilmember Yang's point about does this also apply to resolution recognizing community leaders who pass on, or okay. So I just want to clarify that. I think that's something that happens on the WELM sometimes. So.
Yeah, no, I don't think that that's the intention of this conversation. But thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, and I just to kind of add on from what Councilmember Tell said, I think that's an important distinction here, because I think it's very appropriate for us to honor members of our community, particularly ones who have passed on or contributions and things like that. I'm not sure what the best wording for this is. I think, opening it up a little bit more for some further review would be important. But I think the thing here is, in my personal opinion, and I think this shouldn't be a surprise to many of the people on this call, is, I think right now more than ever, we have a lot of serious issues before us, which we have direct authority or some sort of budgetary power over, that we need to help deal with in St. Paul. And some of these, I have strong opinions on many international things. I have strong opinions on many national political things, which the city of St. Paul has absolutely no authority or say over. We elect good people like Congresswoman McCollum. We elect good people like our governor and others to represent us on that level. But what I find frustrating is we do have a lot on our plate right now. We have a pandemic. We have an economic crisis. This summer, there were 70,000 St. Paulites on unemployment insurance. We have, we're battling systemic racism in our society. We have budgetary issues. We have, we have a public safety crisis. We have so many different things that we need to deal with. And these resolutions, albeit are important conversations, and I have very strong views on them. But I think what it does is, as to kind of pass on to what Council President Bredmoen has been themed this morning, we're all in this together. It looks like when we pass so many symbolic resolutions, which people know are going to get newspaper coverage, it makes, I think, the citizens of St. Paul, the people of St. Paul, think that we have nothing better to do than to weigh into issues that we have absolutely no authority over. And I have strong opinions on them. And let's look at the resolution that Councilmember Prince brought this summer regarding the political party in charge of India. As I said then, I'm not defending the guy. I think he's one of many dictatorial leaders that are rampant in this world that we shouldn't support and U.S. policy shouldn't support. However, we were inundated, basically shut down the council offices for weeks at a time in the middle of a pandemic and economic recession. My biggest worry during that time was missing contacts from constituents who might need help. And it's not because I think I abstained on that vote. It's not because I want to vote yes or no. I do not support the guy. I'm not going to stand up for what he's doing. But I think we have really important work here in St. Paul, and we should focus on that. And I think that's what the people of St. Paul want us to do, is they want us to focus. There are very tangible things that we need to focus on here in the city of St. Paul. And these symbolic resolutions not only are very time consuming potentially, and in truth, but they also give the appearance that this council doesn't either care about the other important issues, or we have a lot of time on our hands and aren't dealing with them. And I think it's important that we consider that when we're bringing these forward. And I think this committee could possibly do some review to say, is this most forward? But at the end of the day, it's on each and every one of us to decide if that's how we want to, put ourselves out there, what we're focusing on as St. Paul City Council members.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. I just have a few things to say. The first one is, as I mentioned earlier, I am really supportive of the process around, resolutions that are related to certain religions, just because I feel like it's so important to have educational context or even political context around what is happening around something so with such high tensions. The other thing I'm feeling too is, the more that we're discussing this is, I feel like for me, I'd actually be very opposed to creating a process around, general or even just symbolic resolutions overall. And I'll say the first reason why is because first, we could all say no to whatever we don't want to spend our time and energy on. It's as simple as that. And so if you have a colleague, who's like introducing something and you're feeling not in support of it, just say no and say, I can't do that. I can't be a co-sponsor or support at this time. You're going to have to find some other folks to support you. And if in the end that person doesn't have that support, maybe they just might not move forward with it. The other thing is, I understand this piece around, hey, like we're St. Paul council members. Maybe we should just focus on St. Paul stuff. Of course, that definitely makes sense. However, I also believe we are people who are elected to be leaders. And we live in a world that is so interconnected, where governments, actually different bodies of government, do work that is related to each other, even though we might not like vote on something that is like within the Ramsey County or like the national, federal level of government. And so while that is the case, like we are a system that actually like needs to work cohesively, and we are also able to have our own opinions on something that happens outside of our city as well, just like how our residents actually really do care about things that happen outside of St. Paul too. So I have no problem spending my time and energy, on doing research on something, or, talking to constituents that feel like something is so important to them that they need to bring it to me or my office so that I hear them out, and if in the end I'm like, I can't do this, then that's what I'll say. And I actually don't need a process to vet out, hey, does Councilmember Yang have time to do this or that? I can determine that for myself and still say no, and also say yes to the things that I feel passionate or feel like I want to invest my time and energy in. So to that point, like I feel the more that, I'm open to having a conversation about this if anyone wants to talk more about it. However, my initial gut feeling is like I would be really opposed to trying to create a even larger process around more general resolutions.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. And I think just maybe circling back to what I said in the very beginning of this conversation, and I appreciate all of the thoughts and input on this, is that this in no way precludes anyone as an individual council member to do whatever they want to do in terms of advocacy or, letters to Congress, people posting opinion pieces, what have you. It's a conversation about when the resolutions come to the group as a whole. So I want to kind of separate those two things, because I do think that we certainly do have the choice, but I heard Ms. Naker say when a resolution about policies in India shows up on a council agenda, that we become obligated as people who will ultimately vote to become educated on that and take a position. So it is when your personal choices become part of the group's the body decision making. So I do, but at the same time I do think that this policy is a work in progress, and even if ultimately what we've done here today is just kind of talked about these honorary resolutions, symbolic resolutions, or that come before us, and just sort of the challenges and passions that are intertwined in them. And I think that just having an understanding of where people are at is helpful. I see Ms. Prince has a hand up, and then Ms. Naker.
Again, I really appreciate, I think, as Council President Brennan says, this is a really important discussion for us to be having. I also think that to some extent, we need to talk to each other when we're bringing in ordinances, honorary resolutions or resolutions about state or national issues. I think we have to talk to each other and have these conversations and be open to what we're all thinking. I know that I brought in the resolution that created the furor in May, and I voted for this resolution to create a policy because I knew that we couldn't go through that again. So I completely appreciate it. On the other hand, I think to Ms. Yang's point, we brought in a resolution, I think it was in my first year. I was asked by the Dakota community in my ward to bring in a resolution in support of the movement at Standing Rock. And I was new. I didn't know where my colleagues would land on it. I checked in with people because I let people know it was coming in. We passed it unanimously. And the response from the community was so incredibly positive for the Dakota community in St. Paul, for our American Indian community in St. Paul. It was extremely meaningful and moving. And one of my neighbors said she went out to Standing Rock to bring supplies and so forth to people who were camping there. And she said she wasn't aware we had passed the resolution. And when she got there, she told somebody she was from St. Paul. And they said, do you know what you just did? You were the first city in the country to pass a resolution in support of what we're trying to do here. Now, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't have a process to consider whether we should have done that. I don't know if we should, but what I'll say is when we are representing multicultural communities and they have issues that have statewide or national impact, they would like us to recognize their issues because we're talking about their families and their lands and their water. And so I just think that we need to think about some of these things that we have passed that would have fallen under a provision like this, where we didn't have a lot of disagreement, we didn't have any disagreement, and where we made a very meaningful impact for people in our community.
So am I correct in hearing you say that these are maybe if there's 7-0 support, that they're meaningful? It's the challenge is when there's not.
No, I'm saying on the honorary ones, I think 7-0 support is appropriate because anybody asking us to pass something ceremonial or honorary certainly doesn't want to see us have a split vote. That's why that's why I've gone to everybody with the resolution that I have pending. I don't need it to go through a 30-day process because it would be embarrassing to me and to the group asking me to bring it in. I think on issues that may fall under this while it's not in our jurisdiction, but there are policy issues, there are impacts on people who live in our community. I mean, obviously, on the India issue, it came to me from the Council on Islamic American Relations because Muslim people in St. Paul have relatives who were being discriminated against, persecuted around the world. And so I want to be mindful that we have an extremely multicultural community and we're going to be asked to do some of these things. And I believe that the religious exclusion or the religious trigger is one that makes perfect sense. I would hope on other resolutions like this that we'd all be encouraged to reach out to each other and have these conversations and talk about them, about whether they're worth bringing forward. But if we end up having a split vote on a national or a statewide issue, I don't know that we should use a council process to not allow us to have opinions that would say we're recommending to our federal delegation or we're recommending to the presidential administration or we're recommending to the governor or our St. Paul delegation a position that is very important to people that we represent.
Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I'll be really brief because I know we've talked about this for a while. Just to Councilmember Prince's point, I have also been guilty of introducing resolutions that got us a lot of communication. So definitely, I don't think it was just one particular resolution that has gotten us to this point. I just want to be clear that this, if we do choose to adopt a policy, it does not preclude introducing the resolution. It just has a step before the resolution is introduced. So the resolution could absolutely still be introduced. As we're talking about it more, I actually wonder if there's a problem with having it only apply to religious resolutions, because I don't know why we are giving special status or discriminating against religious resolutions rather than other kind of resolutions. The India resolution was really as much a political resolution about the oppression of a religious minority as it was a religious resolution. So it was, I think, more in the category of political resolutions taking a stance on political issues in other places that we're not responsible for. And I just wanted to say, finally, I mean, if we don't feel comfortable with a resolution like this, I think the issue for me, to your point, Councilmember Yang, we can always vote no. That's absolutely right. And I actually love having these discussions in public. I think having split votes is great. I think it shows that we're really deliberating on the issues like we're doing right now. But I will say again, to vote no on a resolution is to take a position on that actual issue. And it takes a lot of work, at least for me, to feel like I know an issue well enough, especially an issue that regards a foreign country, another body of government that I haven't been familiarizing myself with, that may have been going on for years, to feel like I know for sure that I'm a yes or a no. And either one of those is taking a position that I will be held accountable for by my constituents. And so if there were an abstention option, I don't know if abstentions are officially part of our rules or not. But if we all have the ability to abstain and we don't want to pass a policy like this, I would probably just make it a personal policy to abstain from any such resolutions. And that would be another way to go. And then if we can't get to 4 yeses, then they don't pass. So that's just another option that we could consider.
Thanks. And I think that's an interesting perspective as well. Like, to Ms. Prince's point, an honorary resolution that's 7-0 has one impact. If you have a policy resolution that is many abstentions, it also changes the flavor or the weight of that resolution. I see Mr. Tao, and then I do think that we probably need to move on after we hear from Mr. Tao, just because we have a big agenda item behind us. So, Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. This is a really great discussion, and I just want to speak through the lens of being a oppressed community, and I'm talking about like our experience through the war and the trauma, and sometimes our community, we rally to oppose, the murder and genocide of Hmong people in Laos, and I'll tell you, to be in that community, to be in that space is so desperate, and that you have no one to go to, and you go to the people that you think represent you, or that is your voice, and now we're in that space where we're representing and we're voices for the voiceless, and so that's why I think having these sort of resolution is helpful. But I think as council member, I think we also need to take the time to educate community members who want us to pass these sort of resolution clearly what we can and can't do, and how this could divide the council, and how there's other unintended situation, and I think that's what we've been practicing in Ward 1, to really educate both sides for and against these sort of resolution, and that is there other ways to help them move the issue to a higher, our congressional leaders or state legislator that have more say. So I think part of that is it's educating them in that sense, and then signing on as individual council offices that support their effort and what they're trying to do. And I think that also achieved the same thing as in putting a resolution forward. I think what we did our sister city with, I believe, Mogadishu, and we had a lot of issue with that. And so I think that's something that we learned from. With all that said, I think that when these sort of resolutions come before us, typically it's coming from the oppressed community. It's coming from the minority group or the group that has the short end of the stick. And so I think we also have to be mindful that they're desperate when they come to us, and they're coming for some sort of solution, some sort of answer. And so a resolution might not be the solution for everything. It could just be part of it. But so I thought these are, as we go forward, I hope that we will consider that people who do come before us are desperate, and they do need us to represent their the tribulation, the struggle.
Thank you. I think that I really appreciate that perspective as well, and yeah, it's very complicated, and I appreciate you're calling out what our role is back to our constituents who reach out to us with these requests, and also just understanding walking a mile in their shoes as well. I think it's all really pertinent. So clearly we've come to a conclusion, and we know exactly what we're doing. Just kidding. So I think this, and again, if we walk away from here today is just like a better understanding of kind of where we're at with this, I think that's great. I think the religious piece of this is the most clear-cut one, and I do want to clarify that I don't think that there's a requirement of a 30-day process. I just think that there was like a bookend to make sure that nothing got dragged out beyond that, especially with some research required. But that seems like a sticking point, so we should make sure that's clear. So I'm getting a bad network quality sign on my Wi-Fi, so hopefully I'm okay. Okay. All right. Well, we'll continue to chip away at that and continue to do this work together. So we have the last item on our agenda today, which is last month was kind of a big one, but I think partially because we hadn't done it in a while, is just updates on commissions and committees and boards. And I don't know if maybe I should start with Mr. Tao because he rolled in right from Port Authority. But if folks have updates from the places where they're representing the city, why don't we do that? Did I put you on the spot, Mr. Tao?
Yeah. Oh, no problem. Thank you. I'm honored. Yeah. So the port, we're doing a lot of work there around racial equity. And so the meeting we had this morning was to bring in Reconnect Rondo as part of our staff and board to celebrate Black History Month, but also to learn about what's going on in our community, how the port could be a part of that project, whether it's technical or financial. So Mr. Marvin Anderson came in and gave a great presentation. So other than that, I gave some board report a couple of weeks ago already, where we continue to be super excited about the Hillcrest site, and we're just waiting for the site plan to come through the city staff. We're almost at max capacity over at the Treasure Island Center. The other day, I was just down there, and they got these really nice restaurant that the glass windows, kind of like garage door that open right into the street. There's lots of stuff that's going on in downtown, and I'm really excited that after COVID and when this pandemic is over, I really believe that our economic situation will continue to just pick up right where we have left off. And so I think the port plays a big deal in that, and the city of St. Paul as well.
Thank you. I miss going out to restaurants so much. I can't wait to check that out. Do you remember what is that restaurant called? The one that's like right out by the palace?
Something, the Pillbox Tavern. Yeah. And so they got some pretty good whiskey there, but I'll make some more recommendation.
We'll make a date to meet there. All right. Thank you for that update, Ms. Naker.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Tao reminded me, I felt like I didn't have anything to update on because it does feel like we kind of just did this. But Councilmember Tao reminded me that downtown is an amazing place with lots of vibrancy, which made me think about the Downtown Alliance, which I don't think I updated on last time. I sit on the board of the Downtown Alliance. As you know, we approved the Downtown Improvement District last year, and that has been formally approved. That is starting to generate revenue to make downtown cleaner, greener, more user safe, and more friendly, which is super exciting. And the Downtown Alliance is actually planning a potentially $1 million plus initiative to welcome people back to downtown. And so I was on a call recently with employers talking about when people are planning to bring their employees back. It's a little bit of game theory, obviously, because what's going to make people feel most safe coming back to downtown is other people coming back to downtown. And so it's a little bit dependent on each other. But the goal is to have a number of programs and events and a social media campaign to let people know that downtown is back and better than ever, and to encourage people to return and let them know that they'll be safe in doing so. So just more to come on that, but wanted to let you know there's a lot of thought going into bringing downtown back after all of this is done.
That's great. Kind of we're open for business and making it fun. And that is where the Downtown Alliance and particularly Joe Spencer really shines. He knows how to make stuff fun. I will interject here with an update from the St. Paul Regional Water Services. I know Ms. Yang is our vice president, so I hope I'm not stepping on any toes here, but Steve Schneider is retiring this month. And so we have gone through a hiring process in the past few weeks. I'm not sure if they're ready to announce the incoming director, but Steve did a lot of good work in kind of planning for his retirement, and hopefully in the next few weeks here we will bring forward a resolution at the council recognizing Steve's service, have a Steve Schneider Day. Anybody who has had the opportunity to serve on the water board knows how well run that organization is and what a treasure it is for our community. So we Chair Humphrey reached out today, and we're making sure that we get that resolution put together just to celebrate the work of Mr. Schneider. And hopefully he's not watching this meeting and the secret has been revealed, but I think it's important that we take note of this transition. Ms. Prince.
Thanks. I was going to say, if we're going to do an honorary resolution, we can all agree that there's a good one to be doing for Steve Schneider. In fact, Steve is so amazing. When we have any issues with sinkholes or water crises in the neighborhood, I mean, the responsiveness is phenomenal. And the idea of Steve not being there, it's kind of unsettling. So I'm sure that he has created a really good succession plan, and that the water utility will continue in good stead. I think my only report is a very positive step forward on reparations. I had a meeting this week with Dr. Uhuru Williams at the University of St. Thomas. He runs their Racial Justice Institute, and he is in with both feet. He is going to be working with us on helping to provide all kinds of support, research, and so forth. So he's going to be joining the steering committee at their meeting next week. But we could not be more fortunate than to have somebody of his background and who brings along the commitment of the University of St. Thomas to help us with our work. And on that note, I also need to reach out to you individually, but I would love for a couple of council offices to join Ward 7 in that work going forward. So I'll be talking to each of you in the coming weeks about that.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. That's great news. Great report. Ms. Yang.
Thank you. I already shared this at the BOMA meeting last time, but so far, our staff working on the Hillcrest development, they have a tentative date for a public engagement meeting around Hillcrest. We've narrowed down to 2 layouts so far for it. It's really exciting. And so if you all want a briefing but haven't gotten it yet, then let me know. I'm happy to have Bill Dermody reach out to you to show you the layouts and explain to you where we're at. And then once we have that date finalized for the community workshop there, I'll definitely inform you all too. So if you're interested in joining or having folks come to, you can definitely do that. And Councilmember Prince, you can definitely count me in and supporting the work around reparations.
Thanks, that's great news. Excellent.
All right, I'm looking to see if other colleagues have updates from boards or commissions. Just a reminder too that as we've mentioned, it feels like we just did this partially because this meeting is pushed up a week. Next week, we are using this time to have our meeting with Ramsey County to discuss their HRA initiative and some of their equity initiatives. And that was a meeting that they had actually scheduled last month, I think at 3:30 on a Wednesday. So it wasn't the best time for us. So we've invited them back. So they will be here in March. So we bumped this meeting up a week. Other reminder, just to folks who jumped on a little bit late on this call, Councilmember Jalali is at Community First Public Safety Citizens League meeting this morning. And so, of course, we're looking for an update from her on the work of the committee, and also on our calendar, we will get an update from the Community First Public Safety team. I think circling back, Ms. Yang had mentioned this, and I know a lot of council members have been requesting an update on where we're at with the investments we made in a Community First Public Safety, kind of in addition, above and beyond what the work of the Citizens League Commission is doing, just to get that check-in on a regular basis, so we know where we should be. To help us it really even in our gun violence conversation, as well as shaping our policies for 2021. So that is will be on our calendar. And then again, when Ms. Jalali is with us at our next meeting, we'll have an update from the Community First Public Safety Citizens League. Ms. Prince.
Yeah, just one other thing I meant to mention. 3 of us on the council are on the Visit St. Paul board, and I believe all our wards were outreached to provide lists of restaurants in our wards that the Visit St. Paul marketing staff is going to be working with St. Paul restaurants to drive business, helping with marketing and purchasing gift certificates and so forth. So if you need more information about that, let us know, but hopefully you did get that email and sent off your list of restaurants in your ward.
Yeah, I love that they're doing that. That was a great request. And it was hard to we don't have quite as many businesses, I think, as some wards do, but so it was challenging to pick our top 10. I think we had to make 11. We just couldn't make it 10. All right. Any other updates from boards and commissions? Okay. Anything else that needs to be discussed here this morning before we adjourn? It's a big day. I do not see any hands up. I don't think there's anything left to cover. We covered a lot of ground here today, had important conversations. Thanks for participating in our committee. We'll continue to have this on a regular schedule, and I think we'll feel like we're really caught up, and hopefully folks are feeling tightened up with our work plan and have a sense of where we're headed this year. So thanks again for everyone's role in getting us to where we are here today with our work plan. I think it's great. It speaks well to where we'll be heading as we go into budget season. So thanks very much. We are adjourned.